I walked into the wedding of my nephew, who I had raised since childhood, and my daughter-in-law said, "Dad, I'm sorry you're not invited. Go away." I quietly left, heartbroken with betrayal. It was sad to see her disrespect me at a wedding that I paid for. And in just 2 hours, my nephew's perfect wedding had turned into a nightmare. Revenge? No, it was justice. If you're watching this video right now, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I walked into the wedding of the one I had raised since childhood, and my daughter-in-law said, "Dad, you're not invited. Please leave." Nothing in my life had ever been so silent. The whole hall glowed under hundreds of crystal lights. Laughter, clinking glasses, the scent of expensive perfume, all of it froze around me. Elaine's voice wasn't loud or harsh, but so cold that I could hear something shatter inside my chest. I looked around. Everything here, the white orchids, the silk table runners, the string quartet playing canon in D, had been paid for with my money. I didn't say that, because people only talk about money when their pride has already been wounded. Elaine stood straight, her face so perfectly made up that I couldn't find a trace of the woman I once knew. 15 years ago, she had been the trembling woman clutching my hand beside my son David's coffin, crying like a child. Today, she looked at me as if I were a stranger who had wandered into a place far too elegant for him. Behind her, Nathan, the grandson I had raised since he was in diapers, stood in a white tuxedo, smiling stiffly, saying nothing. I had taught him how to tie a tie, how to polish his shoes, how to be a decent man. Now he avoided my eyes, as if just meeting my gaze would somehow bring shame to his wedding. I spoke softly, my voice rough. "I only came to give my blessing, to give Nathan a gift from his father." Elaine glanced around, then stepped closer and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Dad, this is for the younger generation. You wouldn't understand. I told Nathan not to let you see this. Please go, I don't want to make a scene." I nodded slightly, without asking why. Excuses in a family always taste the same, like wine left open too long, sharp and stale. I placed the small box in my hand on the guest table. An old wooden box with David's gold watch inside. The father Nathan never remembered. I had meant to give it to him on this important day, as a symbol of continuity. Now it lay there among white envelopes and meaningless bouquets. When I turned to leave, someone laughed, a dry, sharp sound cutting through the music. I didn't know if it was a guest or a server. I only knew I wanted to get out of that place as quickly as possible. The doors opened, and the Seattle afternoon air swept in, damp, cold, tinged with sea salt. The sky was thick and gray, fine mist settling on my suit shoulders. I paused on the steps for a few seconds and looked back. Through the glass doors, I saw Nathan holding his wife's hand. Catherine, the beautiful bride in white. Both were smiling at their guests, as if I had never been there. Inside, the band began another song. The violins played soft and steady, like the rhythm of pretense. I suddenly remembered a long-ago afternoon, when Nathan was 8. I had taken him to his first concert. He had sat next to me, legs swinging, and asked, "Grandpa, why do people play music when they're sad?" I answered, "Because sometimes music is the only way not to cry." Today I learned something new. Some pieces are played to hide the sound of pain. My old pickup truck was parked at the farthest corner of the lot, where the lights didn't reach. Around it were luxury cars, Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, brand new Teslas. I wondered how many of them belonged to people who had never known the worth of an honest hour's work. I opened the door and sat down. The familiar smell of worn leather and gasoline calmed me. I looked at my hands, calloused and rough, the hands that had built a company, signed countless contracts, the hands that had once carried Nathan on his first day of school, patted his shoulder when he got his Stanford scholarship. Now those hands could only rest on the steering wheel, still and quiet. On the passenger seat lay the wedding envelope I had prepared, still sealed. I had written, "For Nathan, my proudest grandson." I smiled faintly. Maybe he would never open it. I started the engine. The sound was like a sigh. Headlights cut through the rain, leaving pale streaks of light. I drove out of the parking lot slowly, like a man leaving a funeral without a coffin. The radio was playing a stock market report. I turned it off. Instead, I heard my heartbeat, slow but steady. After a few minutes, I pulled over under an old oak tree. The hotel lights glimmered faintly on the windshield. I saw my reflection, an old, tired face but still clear-eyed. I thought of David, my son. He had died at 30, when Nathan was 6. His death had destroyed Elaine. I had thought that providing for them, protecting them, would keep a part of my son alive. But maybe I was wrong. I hadn't saved anyone. I had only raised a generation that didn't know kindness has limits. The rain grew heavier. I picked up my phone. Scrolling through the contacts, I stopped at a name I hadn't dialed in years. First National Bank Business Services. My finger hovered, then pressed. There are decisions in life that don't need time to consider, only pain deep enough to erase fear. I made the call. First National, this is Patricia. How may I help you? Patricia, this is Harold Whitmore, account 602-8731. I want to cancel all payments for my family's event today, immediately. Sir, all of them? Including venue, flowers, catering? Everything. Note the reason. Change in moral conditions. Her voice hesitated. I'll need the authorization code for transactions over $10,000. Go ahead. I remember every digit. I recited the numbers like a final prayer. When she confirmed completion, I only said, "Thank you, Patricia. You just helped a man regain his self-respect today." I hung up and leaned back. Everything around me was silent. Only the rain and the hum of the heater remained. I imagined the scene in the ballroom when the credit was declined, when the services began shutting down. I didn't feel joy or revenge, just a strange sense of balance, like a lake gone still after a storm. I started the truck again and drove slowly out of downtown. The city lights of Seattle blurred behind me. Rain streaked across the windshield, washing away everything, even the illusions of those I once loved. On the way home, I remembered something David once said. Dad, sometimes we have to let people learn their own lessons, even if the price is our own heart. I smiled and whispered, "That's right, son." And today, I just started that lesson. When I got home, the clock read 10 to 5. The lakeside house was dimly lit. Margaret, my wife, was sitting in the living room reading. She looked up and asked softly, "Did you see Nathan?" "Yes," I answered calmly, as if talking about the weather. "And I gave him my blessing." She set the book down and looked at me for a long moment. Some wives understand everything without needing details. I walked into my study, took off my jacket, and hung it on the chair. The smell of rain followed me in, damp and cold. On the desk sat an old photo of David and Nathan together. I wiped the dust off the frame and sat down. I opened the ledger, the first page dated 2003, the day I began Nathan's trust fund. On the last page, the total read $2,476,000. I whispered, "Maybe this lesson is worth every penny." Outside, the rain had stopped. The lake was as still as glass. Through the window, I saw the faint reflection of my room's light. In that moment, I realized something simple. Some wounds are not meant to heal, because they remind us that we once knew how to love. I closed the ledger, set the pen on top, and murmured, "They've just lost their last protector, and they don't even know it yet." Then I turned off the light. The room sank into silence, and in the darkness, I clearly heard my heart say, "Today, I didn't lose them. I just found myself again." That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain poured down again, heavy and steady, drumming against the roof tiles as if someone were keeping time for a quiet requiem. Margaret had gone to bed long ago. I stayed in my study, the desk lamp casting its warm light over the worn wooden surface marked by years. On the desk sat the old photo of David, my son, taken on the day he graduated from college. His smile was young, bright, full of the confidence of someone who still believed life was whole. I ran my finger gently across the frame and suddenly realized I was trembling. Perhaps, after all these years, this was the first time I truly felt old. Not because of age, but because my faith had run dry. Next to the photo was the small notebook I'd kept for Nathan. I opened it. The yellowed pages recorded year by year. The money I sent Elaine for tuition. The times I paid for birthdays, clothes, the summer trips Nathan wanted. Every entry was written carefully, not to keep count, but to preserve the tray of something sacred, responsibility and love. 2010. Paid Stanford tuition, $42,600. Nathan received partial scholarship. 2014. Bought car for Nathan, $48,000. Elaine said he needed something that fits in with his friends. 2016. Transferred money for their first apartment, $320,000. Nathan said he'd pay it back. Never mentioned again. The numbers lay still, cold, but every line carried a scent of memory. The smell of paper, of construction sites, of sweat and time. I wondered, when did kindness become my own humiliation? The next day, I drove out of the city just to kill time. Seattle was the same. Mist around the lake, the wind carrying the chill of the sea. At my age, I had no need to seek anyone out, and no one truly needed me anymore. When I stopped at a cafe by the lake, the barista recognized me and smiled. She was the woman I had once helped get a loan to start this very cafe 10 years ago. I remembered clearly. She had just divorced, raising 2 small children, her hands shaking as she signed the papers. Now her shop was full of customers and smelled of freshly baked bread. She asked, "Mr. Harold, you haven't been around lately. Is Nathan doing well?" I just smiled and answered lightly, "He just got married. Everything must be better than ever." She beamed. "That's wonderful. I still remember you once said, 'Anyone Mr. Harold helps is blessed.'" I looked out at the lake, sunlight scattering faintly over the water. I didn't reply. That kind of praise used to feel warm. Now it felt like a fine blade, because the people I had helped the most were the ones who pushed me away the furthest. In the afternoon, I came home and saw an envelope on the dining table. Margaret had left it there with "From Elaine" written on the front. I opened it, a thank you card printed on thick, gold-embossed paper. The machine-written message read, "Our family sincerely thanks Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore for your thoughtfulness and blessings on the special day of Nathan and Catherine." No handwritten line, no signature. I chuckled softly. No bitterness. Just a quiet strangeness. Humiliation, I realized, doesn't come from what people say, but from the absence of any feeling at all. I folded the card and placed it on the fireplace. The thick paper burned slowly, but when the flames reached the words, "Sincerely thanks," it flared up with startling speed. Margaret stepped out and watched me silently. "You don't have to burn it, Harold," I answered softly. "No, I'm not burning the card. I'm burning the illusion that kindness makes people more decent." She said nothing, just placed her hand on my shoulder, light as an unspoken forgiveness. That evening, as we sat together on the sofa, I suddenly asked, "Do you remember the day David died?" "I do. I'll never forget." "Me neither. But what I didn't expect was that the one who remembered him least would be our daughter-in-law." Margaret looked at me, understanding what I meant. "Elaine once said, 'Dad, I promise I'll raise Nathan to be a good man, so he'll never forget what you've done.' 20 years later, she kept her word. She raised Nathan to be educated, successful. Only the word good was left out of the curriculum. 3 days later, I got a call from my financial manager. "Mr. Harold, I noticed all the payments for your family's wedding event were abruptly stopped. Is there an issue?" "No issue," I said simply. "I just realized I've been paying too much for something that no longer belongs to me." There was a pause, then he said softly, "Would you like me to cancel their recurring donations as well?" "Yes. Replace them with the Animal Protection Fund in Spokane. At least those creatures understand loyalty." That night, Margaret suggested I take a few days to rest. I only smiled. The truth was, I'd never felt more clear-headed. Betrayal doesn't drive you mad. It sharpens your vision. I had spent my whole life teaching others how to invest. Now I understood. Investing in people's hearts is the highest risk market of all. On the 4th day, I received a message from Elaine. "Dad, thank you for the gift. I'll give the watch to Nathan after the honeymoon." That was it. Nothing more. I read it several times, then deleted it. The watch didn't need to be returned. The one who received it no longer understood the value of time, or of the man who gave it. I went down to the lake. It was raining again. Seattle rain always lingers, like background music for those who have nothing left to lose. I sat on the wooden bench, listening to the water touch the lake's surface, and suddenly remembered Nathan at 13, when I taught him his first lesson in finance. Do you know why I keep such careful records of everything? Because you're afraid of losing money? No. Because I'm afraid of forgetting what's truly valuable. Now I feared nothing left to lose, only that I had spent a lifetime placing my faith in the wrong people. Back home, I stood before the mirror, looking at the old man reflected there. Wrinkled face, but eyes no longer weak. Perhaps humiliation is a kind of mirror. It shows you exactly who's still looking back. I whispered, "Fine then. If they've forgotten who I am, I'll remind them in the language they understand. Numbers." I turned on the computer, opened my bank account, and reviewed the entire list of canceled payments. The vendors' names, the amounts, the timestamps, all marked stopped. A strange calm filled me, not satisfaction, but release. For the first time in years, I had done something not out of love, not out of duty, but out of self-respect. Outside, the rain began again. The wind blew through the old oaks, screeching like a violin playing the wrong note. I glanced at the clock. 11 p.m. I closed the ledger and blew out the lamp, and in the darkness, I knew I was ready for what came next. What the world might call revenge, but what I called by another word: justice. The next morning, Seattle lay under a thick blanket of fog. The lake was flat as a sheet of silver, the dim light reflecting faintly through the window pane. I made myself a cup of black coffee, the bitter scent mingling with the cold, damp air. Margaret was still asleep, and the house was utterly silent, like the pause before a piece of music changes key. I opened my notebook and turned to the page marked Will. The paper had yellowed slightly, the handwriting old and uneven, mine from 10 years ago, back when I still believed that kindness could last forever if one remained good enough. Under the word beneficiaries were two names: Elaine Whitmore and Nathan Whitmore. I stared at them for a long time. Then, slowly, I drew a blue line through each one. No shaking, no hesitation. Just a strange, calm steadiness. I called my old lawyer, Margaret Reed, who had helped me draft my first will. Her voice was as steady and professional as it had been a decade earlier. "Mr. Harold, it's been a while. What can I do for you this morning?" "I want to update my will. Completely." "Completely? You mean none of it remains for your family?" "No, my family has been well taken care of. It's time I choose who truly deserves it." There was a brief silence. I heard the faint scratch of her pen against paper. "Do you already have an idea of how you'd like to allocate your estate?" "Yes, 75% to the Paws and Hearts Foundation, a rescue for abandoned animals, 25% to the Riverside Education Fund, scholarships for students with financial hardship." "And your relatives?" $1,000 each, so they'll know I still remember them, even if there's no reason left to trust them. After the call, I printed the full financial summary: shares, bonds, investment funds, real estate, cash accounts. Total value, $32.4 million. I pinned each page to the wooden board behind my desk, looking at them as if they formed a panoramic portrait of my life. Every line, every number, was the trace of years spent working without rest, chasing something I once called security for my family. Now I understood. Security isn't about having heirs. It's about being able to let go without regret. That afternoon, I sat in the law office, warm golden light pouring through the window. Margaret Reed looked at me over her silver-rimmed glasses, her gaze a mixture of empathy and professionalism. "Mr. Harold, may I ask, what happened?" I smiled. Nothing dramatic, just a father realizing he's no longer welcome at the party he paid for. "So, is this revenge?" "No, Mrs. Reed. This is a correction of value. At my age, revenge is a luxury. I'm merely balancing the books, as any honest accountant would." She nodded. Experience had taught her that some sorrows don't need to be told, only acknowledged. When I returned home, Margaret was in the backyard tending to the lavender beds. "Where have you been all morning?" sorting out a few things. About Nathan again? Not exactly. About dignity. She set down the trowel, wiped her hands with a cloth, and looked at me, the look of someone who has long since learned every rhythm of her partner's heart. Do what you believe is right, Harold. Just don't let pain turn you into someone else. I won't, Maggie. I'm just done being someone they can look down on. She said nothing. The scent of lavender drifted through the air, sweet, but with a trace of bitterness. That night, I opened an old file labeled Whitmore Financial, the company I'd built over 30 years and sold when I retired. Inside were contracts, letters of thanks from clients, a few photos of the staff. I took one picture, me, David, and little Nathan sitting on my shoulders, grinning from ear to ear. I pinned it to the corner of the new will's board, just below the heading, Whitmore Estate Redistribution Plan. 3 generations in one photograph, and only one of us left, awake and alone. The next day, I received the draft of the new will from the law office. Each line was neatly typed, cool and impersonal. I read every word carefully, not missing a single period. I, Harold Whitmore, being of sound mind, hereby declare that my estate shall be distributed as follows. I read to the end, where the clause for Elaine Whitmore and Nathan Whitmore appeared. Each shall receive $1,000 as a symbol of gratitude for the past. I smiled. $1,000. A small, almost mocking sum, yet enough to make one read it twice. I signed my name, set the pen down, and watched the ink bleed faintly into the paper. In that moment, I didn't feel like I was taking revenge. I felt like I was restoring balance. That afternoon, as I was sorting through some files, the phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice the moment she spoke. "Dad, it's me, Elaine." I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. I heard you canceled the wedding payments. The vendors are coming after us. It's chaos. I just don't understand. Why would you do that? A good question, Elaine. I used to ask myself something similar for 20 years. Why I did everything for you, without you ever asking if I was tired. Dad, I don't want to argue. I just feel humiliated. People are talking. Nathan's really hurt. He's hurt? I interrupted, my tone calm. Imagine standing in front of hundreds of people, hearing your daughter-in-law say, "Dad, please leave. Tell me, who do you think was really hurt that day?" Silence on the line. I heard her swallow. "I'm sorry. I just didn't want people to judge us." "And you traded the dignity of the man who raised you for the opinion of strangers." "Fine, Elaine. But don't worry. No one will judge you again. Because from now on, you and I have nothing left to do with each other." I hung up, and not angry, not shaking. Just the feeling of wind moving through an empty house, clean, cold, and still. That evening I sat on the porch, watching the crescent moon shimmer on the lake. Margaret brought 2 glasses of red wine and set one before me. "What did you just do, Harold?" I closed a door they'd already left open. "And do you feel lighter now?" "Not exactly, but at least I've stopped asking why." She nodded, taking a slow sip. The scent of grapes and oak drifted into the damp air. I watched the silver ripples on the water, and suddenly, I remembered something an old client once said. Sometimes, the silence of power is the harshest punishment. I smiled. Silence. Yes, and I was punishing them with exactly that. That night, I wrote a single line in my journal, plain and final. March 14th. I removed them from my will, not out of anger, but because it's time they live by their own worth. When I closed the notebook, the grandfather clock in the living room struck 12, slow, steady chimes, each one a period, not for love, but for the illusion that love could never betray. I never went back there, but in my mind, I could still hear the orchestra playing Canon in D, the song of those who believe life will always stay in harmony. Perhaps they never learned that even within the most beautiful chord, a single wrong note can make the whole piece collapse. I didn't go back, but I knew exactly what would happen. That afternoon, at precisely 4:15 p.m., while Seattle lingered under a light drizzle, a row of white trucks began to pull up in front of the Four Seasons Hotel. The logo Everbloom floral design gleamed faintly on their wet sides. 3 uniformed workers stepped down, carrying plastic crates and toolkits for arranging flowers. Inside, the wedding reception was in full swing. The string quartet was playing Moon River. Guests raised their glasses, smiles shining beneath the chandelier's glow. Someone was telling a story about love, and laughter rippled through the hall. Then, the doors opened. The florists entered as if stepping out of another world, one where work was honest and unhidden by luxury. They said nothing. They simply began removing the white flower baskets from their stands. Orchid petals fell onto the carpet, soft, damp, like the remnants of last night's rain. Some guests turned around, confused. A woman whispered, "What's going on?" A waiter passed by, just as lost. At the center of the hall, Elaine stood, startled. She moved toward the workers. "Excuse me, what are you doing? The event isn't over yet." The young woman holding the invoice replied politely but firmly, "The payment for this contract has been canceled, ma'am. We're here to collect our goods." "Canceled? That's impossible. I signed this contract last month." "Yes, that's right. But the payment account is under Mr. Harold Whitmore, and he canceled everything at 3:47 p.m. today." The first sound of something breaking wasn't from an object. It was from the silence that rippled through the crowd. Laughter died. The music stopped mid-note. Bows hung frozen above strings. Elaine looked around for Nathan. He stood far off among Catherine's friends, his face pale. Catherine stared at her mother-in-law, confused, then horrified, whispering something no one answered. Outside, another truck pulled up. Elegant Taste Catering. The manager, Marcus, entered through the side door and quietly told the staff, "Shut down the kitchen, pack the food, stop serving wine." The scent of roasted beef and red wine still lingered in the air. The servers quietly began clearing the trays, replacing them with empty tables and half-finished glasses. A male guest frowned. "Why are they taking the food away?" The waiter bowed, voice trembling. "Sir, the restaurant just received notice of suspended payment." Chairs scraped, heels clicked. Murmurs spread like small waves across the room. I could see it all clearly, because I'd witnessed its kind many times before, when a building collapsed because someone cut corners on materials, when a company went bankrupt from deceit, when trust was drained little by little until there was nothing left. And now, they were seeing that truth for themselves, naked, undeniable. Meanwhile, I was driving along Mercer Lake Road. The wind bent the pines, whispering a language only silence could understand. The radio played an old jazz tune, smooth, wistful, like the breath of the past. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph, just lightness. as if I had finally set down a stone I'd carried too long. Back at the hotel, chaos spread. The sound crew began dismantling microphones. The event coordinator paced, phone pressed to her ear. An older man, Catherine's father, approached Elaine, his voice low and tense. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm told your ex-father-in-law just canceled every contract. What's going on here? He's not well. He's trying to humiliate us." "Well, congratulations," he said flatly. "You've just succeeded." His words froze her in place. Across the hall, Nathan came forward, tugging at his mother's arm. "Mom, stop. I'll handle it." "What do we do, Nathan? Everyone's watching." "Exactly. So please, just don't say another word." His voice shook, but fear had already hardened in his eyes. On the stage, Catherine tried to smile, whispering something into a microphone that was no longer on. The image of the bride in her white gown, standing in a silent hall without music or flowers, surrounded by pitying stares. That was a painting no artist would dare to paint. I pulled over by the lake, turned off the engine, and rolled down the window. The phone rang. The screen lit up. Elaine Whitmore. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, another call. Nathan. I looked at his name and a strange feeling stirred in me. Not anger, but pity. I let it ring until it stopped. A person only learns when they've been silent long enough to hear their own breathing. Inside the ballroom, the unraveling continued. A crew from Soundwave Events entered to take down the speakers. The musicians looked at one another, embarrassed, then quietly left the stage. The music died. Only whispers and the sound of wind through open doors remained. Catherine clutched Nathan's arm, whispering through broken breath, "I don't understand. What's happening? Why is everyone saying your grandfather?" Nathan shook his head, his voice nearly cracking. "I don't know. Maybe some misunderstanding." But in his eyes I knew he understood everything. Outside, evening deepened. Truck lights flickered against the glass walls. Crates were wheeled out. Flowers, fabrics, lights, instruments, all dismantled with a professionalism that bordered on cruel. I could see it all. Elaine standing in the middle of the hall, her expensive heels crushed into wilted petals. Nathan with his head bowed, Catherine holding his trembling hand. No one spoke. Every word would have been useless now. Truth doesn't need to be explained. It only needs to be seen. I kept driving, crossing the small bridge toward the south end of Lake Union. The sunset hung like silk across the water. Evening in Seattle always looks peaceful, deceptively so, as if no tragedy could ever disturb this city. But I knew that somewhere out there, a woman was crying. A man had his head in his hands, and hundreds of guests were whispering a story they would never forget. The story of a perfect wedding undone by sheer ingratitude. I pulled into a roadside rest stop. Inside the convenience store, a young clerk greeted me with a bright smile. "Good evening, sir. Coffee or pastry today?" "Just coffee, black and hot." "Would you like some sugar?" "No, it's bitter enough." He didn't understand, just smiled. I carried the cup outside, sat on a wooden bench, and watched the drizzle fall onto the lake. I turned on the radio. The news spoke of markets, interest rates, things I used to follow daily. Now those numbers meant nothing, because today I had found something worth more than profit: the silence of dignity. I sat there a long time, listening to the rain mix with the hum of passing cars. At 72, a man stops counting what he has and starts counting what he's ready to let go. My phone buzzed again. 3 more missed calls from Elaine. 1 message from Nathan. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I didn't know." I placed the phone face down. Sometimes silence is the only honest answer. That night, I returned home. Margaret met me at the door, her face calm, as if she already knew everything. "I heard," she said. "People are talking everywhere." "I know. Do you feel satisfied?" I shook my head. "No, Maggie. Satisfaction comes when you beat someone else. Today, I only beat my own fear." She nodded, smiling sadly. "You did what everyone else is too afraid to do." "No. I only did what they should have remembered. That love isn't a license to wound." Later that night, I stood on the porch, looking at the lake. The moon shimmered, the water barely stirred. I thought of Elaine, of Nathan, of Catherine, and of myself. None of us would ever be the same. There are nights so defining that no one can ever live as if they hadn't happened. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and took a small sip. The burn spread warmly down my throat. I exhaled slowly and whispered to myself, "Justice doesn't need blood, only truth." Then I set the glass down and left it still. Outside, the rain had stopped, and inside me, for the first time in years, the storm had stopped too. 2 years passed as swiftly as a long, quiet sigh. Seattle was still damp and somber, but within that melancholy, I had found peace. The house by the lake remained the same. The oaks still shed their leaves faithfully each season, and I still brewed my black coffee every morning, sitting by the window, watching the mist drift across the water as if it were an old companion. Since that wedding, no one had mentioned my name. The rumors had flared up, then faded, ripples that died quickly after the rain. Elaine moved out of her luxury neighborhood, sold her apartment to pay her debts. Nathan left his job. People said he and Catherine had separated. I didn't ask. Some truths don't need to be told. They only need time to reveal themselves. I still read the papers, still volunteered for the Animal Foundation, still talked with Margaret every evening. We lived as though we had let everything go. Yet somewhere inside there remained a quiet corner untouched, where the memory of a boy who once called me Grandpa still rested, waiting to be acknowledged. One late March morning, as I was tidying my desk, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the mailman, but a delivery man holding a beige envelope, carefully sealed. In the top corner, the sender's name was printed, Nathan Whitmore. I held the envelope for a long moment. It felt both warm and cold, warm because of the name, cold because of what it carried. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The lines slanted and uneven, as if written through hesitation. "Grandpa, I don't know where to start. These past 2 years, everything in my life has fallen apart. Work, marriage, reputation. Catherine is gone. Mom moved to Florida to live with Aunt Claire. I stayed in Seattle alone in a small rented apartment. I've had a lot of time to think. And the more I think, the more I realize what I truly lost. Not money, not a home, but your respect. I understand now that you didn't destroy my wedding. You only showed me what it was built on. If you'll allow it, I'd like to see you, just to say I'm sorry. Nathan." I read every word slowly, then set the letter down. Not moved, not angry, just a quiet sadness, like the still surface of the lake before dawn. Margaret came in, holding a cup of tea. She saw the envelope and asked gently, "From him?" "Yes." "Will you answer?" "I think it's time to hear what he's learned from his loss." We met at an old cafe by Green Lake, the same one I'd taken him to when he was in high school, to talk about his future. The cafe hadn't changed. The smell of damp wood, the hum of the coffee grinder, the dim light spilling through fogged glass. Nathan arrived 10 minutes late. He'd walked from the bus stop, thinner, wearing a worn coat, his hair brushing his collar. When he saw me, he paused at the door, hesitated, then approached. "Hi, Grandpa." "Sit down." I motioned for him to take a seat. Between us, there was no hug, no handshake, only silence. The heavy kind that hangs between two people who share a name but have wandered too far from each other. The waitress brought 2 coffees. Nathan nodded his thanks, then fell silent again. I waited for him to speak. "Finally," he said, his voice rough, every word weighted. "Grandpa, I'm sorry." I looked straight into his eyes. 2 years ago, those same eyes had avoided mine in a glittering ballroom. Now they held no pride, only the bare truth of regret. "I'm sorry I let them hurt you. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't have the courage to stop it." "Why?" "Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing them. Afraid of being called ungrateful. Afraid of being a bad son." "And you lost everything anyway." He nodded, eyes red. "Yes. I lost everything. My job, my wife, my reputation. People laugh behind my back. And I realized the one thing I can't buy back is trust." I took a slow sip of coffee, the bitterness spreading on my tongue. "You haven't lost anything, Nathan. You're just learning how to count what truly matters." He looked up, puzzled. I continued, "Loss is the only lesson you can't learn from a book. It teaches you how to live again, how to love, how to respect. And if you're patient, it gives back what you lost. Character." Nathan lowered his head, silent for a long time. I let the moment stretch, giving him room to absorb it. "Grandpa, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want a chance to start over. Forgiveness is what the weak demand. I don't want you to be weak anymore. What should I do? If you want to start again, do it with your own hands." He nodded. "I will. I've applied for a job at a nonprofit, an education fund. I want to help kids who can't afford to study, because now I know how painful it is to be given something and not appreciate it." I looked at him. The soft cafe light reflected on his face, now older, humbler. The polished young man I once knew was gone. What sat before me was someone trying to reclaim his place in the world. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the mist drifted over the lake, and the wind whispered through the trees, like a reminder of passing time. Nathan asked quietly, "Do you hate me?" "No," I said, slowly and clearly. "I don't hate anyone anymore. At my age, you stop hating. You only regret. I regret that you had to learn this lesson the hardest way." He smiled faintly and wiped his tears. "I wish I'd understood sooner. If you had, you wouldn't be real. People only become real after they've broken." We left the cafe as the sky dimmed. Before parting, Nathan stopped and said softly, "Grandpa, thank you for seeing me. I know I don't deserve it, but I'll work to earn the Whitmore name again. I nodded. Don't say it. Do it. And remember, decency isn't about being praised. It's about being able to sleep at night. He nodded again, a spark of light returning to his eyes. As he walked away, the wind tousled his hair. I watched his figure disappear behind the trees, and for a moment, it felt like watching a younger version of myself. Naive, wounded, still learning how to be human. I stayed in the cafe a little longer, listening to the quiet sounds of cups clinking, doors opening and closing. In that small noise, I could hear something fragile stirring back to life. Not a relationship, but the belief that remorse can still create something good. That night, back home, Margaret found me sitting by the fireplace, the glow flickering across my face. You met him? Yes. Has he changed? Yes. Not much, but truly. She smiled, soft as a breeze. You didn't forgive him, did you? No. Forgiveness means setting the sin aside. I want him to carry it, to remember. So you still trust him? I do, because he told the truth. And a man who can speak the truth will, sooner or later, learn how to live right. Before bed, I took Nathan's letter and placed it beside the old photo of David. The candlelight shimmered on the glass frame, trembling like a breath. I spoke quietly, almost like a prayer. My son, maybe the boy's finally finding his way. He may never become the man we dreamed of, but at least he's learning to begin again, the way we once taught him. The wind from the lake slipped through the cracks of the window, carrying the cold scent of water and the sound of small waves. I closed my eyes. No anger, no expectation. Only a simple feeling remained. Someone, somewhere was learning how to count what truly matters. A year later. Seattle still rains, still gray, still has mornings where fog drifts around the lake like the breath of old ghosts. I've learned to love this city for its sadness, a sadness that never turns to despair, quiet but never dead. That morning, as usual, I brewed black coffee and opened the Seattle Times. On page 3, under Community Highlights, a small headline made me pause. Young man launches tech fund for orphaned children in Washington. Below it was a photo of a young man standing among a group of kids, holding an old laptop, smiling. I didn't need to read the name to know who it was. Nathan. The light in the picture was dim, but his eyes shone, no longer with the gleam of someone proving himself, but of someone doing the right thing. I read the article to the end. Tomorrow's Code, founded by Nathan Whitmore, provides basic technology training for orphaned children to help them find early employment. The project, initially supported by a local charity, is now expanding through community contributions. I folded the paper and sat still. Inside me was a feeling both warm and distant, like seeing a lost child finally find his way home. Margaret brought out her tea and set it gently on the table. What's the news, dear? Just a small article about Nathan. She smiled and sat beside me. What's he doing now? Teaching orphans computer skills. Really? Really. We said nothing more. The silence stretched, but it was the gentlest silence I'd ever known. Margaret placed a hand on my shoulder. Will you call him? I shook my head lightly. No. When someone learns to stand again, the best thing you can do is let them keep walking. She nodded. Perhaps her joy was like mine, small but steady as an underground stream. That afternoon, I went to the lake. The rain fell softly. The water rippled in widening circles. I sat on the same old wooden bench, the one I'd sat on countless times, watching the mist melt into the surface. In the sound of rain, I could hear my own voice from years ago. Harsh, cold, angry. And then I could hear my voice now. Slower, deeper, softer. I once thought justice meant making others pay. Now I understand. True justice is finding peace so deep that no one needs to pay anymore. I remembered our last meeting in that cafe, when Nathan had promised to do something worthy of the Whitmore name. He had kept that promise not through money or long apologies, but through action. Once David, my son, had said, "Dad, I don't want my child to inherit my wealth. I want him to inherit my character." Tonight those words rang in my head like a bell. Perhaps, in the end, even if he wandered, Nathan had found the path his father once hoped for him. Later that evening, I opened my computer. There was an unread email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read simply, "For you, from tomorrow's code." I opened it. The message was short. "Grandpa, today I launched my first class. 12 children, ages 9 to 15. I don't know if you saw the article, but I want you to know that everything I'm doing started with what you taught me. Know how to count what's worth keeping. I'm still not worthy of the Whitmore name, but I'm trying. Every day. Thank you for not forgiving me. If you had, I might never have changed." Nathan. I read it twice, then printed it out and placed it beside the photo of David, next to the old thank you letter Nathan once sent when he got his scholarship. 3 pieces of paper. 3 chapters of a life. The past, the mistake, and the redemption. Margaret passed by, pausing behind me. "Are you crying?" "No, my eyes just sting a bit." "Because you're happy?" "Because I'm lighter." She smiled and kissed my cheek. A simple gesture, but full of understanding between 2 people who had survived all their storms together. "Do you think you'll see him again?" "Maybe, but there's no rush. Every good thing takes time, even reconciliation." The next day, I took the newspaper and the letter to the Paws and Hearts Animal Foundation. Inside, kittens darted around, and the distant bark of old dogs echoed from the back. A young woman greeted me. "Here to check the fund, sir?" "No. I came to say that sometimes money isn't the only thing that can save someone." She smiled, not fully understanding, but nodded anyway. I left and walked along the wet street. Each step on the pavement had its own sound, as if I were walking through my own past, and for the first time it didn't weigh me down. By dusk, I was home. I opened the window. The rain still fell lightly. Droplets slid down the glass, leaving faint trails like memories fading with time. Across the lake, the lights from distant houses shimmered on the water, like 1,000 small stories still unfolding. Stories of people who had failed, lost, and were still trying to begin again. I sat by the window, holding a cup of jasmine tea. Its gentle fragrance filled the air. The lamp's glow caught my reflection, the wrinkles deeper, but my eyes brighter. I looked out toward the soft Seattle rain and whispered, just loud enough for myself, "No one is invited to stay in our lives forever, but those who learn to cherish will always have a place." I smiled faintly. The old clock struck 8. Outside, the rain kept its rhythm. A piano played on the radio, slow, deep, warm. The music filled the small room, mingling with the scent of rain, fading gently into the air. I once thought justice was making others pay. Now I understand. True justice is when you're at peace enough not to need them to. I looked out at the lake a while longer, then turned off the light. The last reflection glimmered on the window. The face of an old man, calm and unburdened. No more anger, no more loss, only the quiet peace of someone who finally understands.